painters achieved the level of recognition and admiration that Cézanne earned, even if such accolades only came years after his death. His work is characterized as demanding in the pursuit of his stated goal of realization, while delivering themes common since the Renaissance, such as portraits, figures, landscapes, and still lifes. Paul Cézanne was born out of wedlock on January 19, 1839 in Aix-en-Provence. Quick-tempered, but otherwise reserved and moody, Paul had few friends growing up, but he was unflinching in standing up for those who were weaker. Cézanne first went to law school, but eventually dropped out and went to work at his father's bank, although he remained fascinated by paintings. Finally, his father relented and let him move to Paris, and equipped him with a monthly allowance of 150 francs. Once in the capital, Cézanne regularly took classes at the Académie Suisse, one of the many private art schools in Paris, where budding talents could draw nude models for very little money. Cézanne's early paintings are characterized by dark themes in an impasto style. He also created figure paintings in domestic surrounding and still lifes, all part of the artistic discipline that Cézanne sought to acquire through his study of the Dutch and Spanish masters in the Louvre Museum. Cézanne began his intensive work on landscape motifs after 1870. He had been living with the artist model Marie Hortense Figuet since 1869. Indeed, it was not until 1872, when Cézanne's son Paul was born, that his father discovered the relationship, largely because Cézanne repeatedly had to ask him for money. In 1886, Cézanne finally married his longtime companion, but the couple had already become largely estranged by this point. When Cézanne returned to Paris in 1871, he was still far removed from the achievements of the emerging Impressionist movement. So he followed the suggestion of his old friend Camille Pissarro that the two should paint together. Pissarro took Cézanne out on painting excursions, where he tried to teach Cézanne the principles of Impressionism with the patience of a fatherly friend. Cézanne participated in the first and third Impressionist exhibitions out of solidarity, but his work was only met with ridicule. This led Cézanne to flee to Aix, where he sought to recoup new strength in the peace and quiet of his native Provence. At this point, he mostly painted figure paintings, including many scenes of men and women bathing in the wild, reflecting pastoral themes from the Renaissance, with an idyllic view as the ideal state of harmony between humankind and nature. Cézanne's bather was strictly separated by gender, and later the difference begins to blur as his images shifted in favor of highly stylized figures. They were initially small and manageable groups of figures captured in various poses. Cézanne then later expanded these scenes to include many figures where the variety of movement was restricted to a few typical poses of standing, squatting, or lounging. The figures and the surrounding landscape increasingly began to merge into an overarching harmonious unity. Although Cézanne kept a studio in Paris until the turn of the century, he was drawn more and more back home to his native Provence. In and around Aix, Cézanne found landscape motifs that inspired him to recreate his painting style again and again. One of his favorite places was the small village of L'Estaque, where he repeatedly stayed between 1870 and 1888 for intensive periods of work. Over time, Cézanne's objects became simplified, and he consolidated his image composition. To escape conflict at home, Cézanne began walking the 17 kilometers to Garden every day, which is a small mountain town in Provence. The staggering houses on the flat hilltop inspired a number of paintings that showcase the cubic structure of the houses. The lines of the chest, the table edges, the side of the screen, and the pieces on the table create vertical and horizontal lines. Other references are created by the variation of round and elliptical shapes in the fruits, the openings in the bowls, and the locks and handles on the chest. The various openings cannot be viewed from a central focal point. Cézanne repeatedly switched up the direction of the perspective to allow the references within the image to stand out more clearly. In addition to landscapes and still lifes, Cézanne also painted large figures painting in eggs, often putting his models in uncomfortable poses for hours. Madame Cézanne frequently had to serve this purpose. There are some pictures of her from this period that show her with a rather straight and absent demeanor. Some farmers at the Jardin de Buffon probably serve as models for Cézanne's 1893 to 1896 series of card players. Starting with a group of 5 men, Cézanne narrowed in on 2 men sitting opposite and very focused on their hands that had been dealt. In 1897, Cézanne moved to Rue Boulogne in Aix, where a housekeeper, Madame Bramont, took care of him. She was made to model for him too, as can be seen in one of Cézanne's most beautiful and important works, Woman with Coffee Pot. The strict composition is emphasized by the vertical spoon in the coffee cup and the cylindrical shape of the coffee pot. If no models were available, Cézanne would go back to painting still lifes with fruits and flowers. The carefully arranged objects, vases, and bowls from the studio, often filled with apples and pears, and a few white sheets. The intense shades of purple, yellow, red, and green on the oriental carpet, and the apples and oranges scattered on the table form a vivid contrast to the white tablecloth, which absorbs the various nuances of these colors. Despite the significant lessons that Cézanne learned from his still lifes and landscapes, he still saw the figure paintings as the focus of his last decade and the ultimate goal of his art. The series of bathers starting back in the 1870s was a repeated motif throughout his life. He used them not only to address the pastoral, but also to record his childhood memories of a perfect harmony between humankind and nature. For Cézanne, the old masters were always a source of edification and training. At the Louvre, he admired Titian, Tintoretto, Giorgione, Rubens, and Veronese, and also works by the painters from earlier in the century, especially Courbet and Delacroix. Cézanne's late works frequently included wonderful watercolors, where the artist patiently apply layer upon layer of color to have it culminate in a white spot. The underlying sketches are also visible in these watercolors, and they show how colors are applied in a tentative attempt to keep that airiness and freshness that grew out of pure nature observation. Paul Cézanne paints the massif of Saint-Victoire, which is visible far and wide in the Provence. Houses, trees, meadows, mountains, and even the sky are transformed into a sparkling play of color contrast. The colored dots act as building blocks of a new pictorial language: warm to cold, light to dark, color contrast to color contrast. Cézanne called this new method of painting modulation, actually a term from music for the switch from one key to another. Cézanne died on October 23, 1906, probably at work on his last picture, Jourdain's Cottage.